Good afternoon, and thank you for coming on this rather dreary-looking day. I am delighted to welcome today Kate Paisani. Did I pronounce that right? Perfect. Who is associate professor at Wayne State University, where she's the director of basic French courses and the director of the Master of Arts in Language Learning program in the Department of Classical and Modern Languages, Literatures, and Cultures. Her specialization is in foreign language literacy development and teacher professionalization, currently working on a project studying high-leverage teaching practices, or the core tasks and activities essential for effective teaching and student achievement, and working toward a larger project investigating high-leverage teaching practices across languages and contexts and connecting them to theoretical and pedagogical concepts from the multiliteracies framework and sociocultural theory. She has a PhD in French linguistics from Indiana University, also an MA in French linguistics from Indiana University, and a BA from University of Connecticut. She has co-edited a volume for AAUSC titled Language Program Articulation, Developing a Theoretical Foundation. And she has published on teacher development and professionalization, language acquisition through literature, and a multiliteracies approach to language learning. She most recently co-authored a volume entitled A Multiliteracies Framework for Collegiate Foreign Language Teaching, which actually serves as the text for an ad hoc discussion group of language instructors here on campus. Today she'll talk to us about building synergies in 21st century language programs through literacy development and teacher professionalization. Welcome, Kate Paisani.
All right, is this going to be good, the placement? Yeah? Okay. Can you all hear me? Yeah, okay. So thank you for that very kind introduction. I'm a little bit embarrassed, but I also want to thank the search committee for inviting me here, and I want to thank Karen for organizing my visit and being so efficient with everything. I'm really delighted to be here. I have long admired the work of the center. I've sent my methods students to use resources on the CARLA website. I have consulted the Virtual Assessment Center myself for inspiration as I've revamped my introductory French program over the last couple of years. I've presented twice at the Language Teacher Education Conference. I've reviewed abstracts for the conference. I've published in one of the proceedings. So I feel connected to CARLA, and I'm just really pleased to be here and to be able to talk to you about my research and my vision for the center. And as you can see from the title of my talk, in preparing for today, the concept of synergies kept coming to mind. So that's going to be sort of a running theme through what I talk about today. And I'm going to apologize for the cheesy graphic, but I thought it kind of captured what I was trying to talk about today. So as you can see on the slide, a number of synergies or connections characterize both CARLA and my own research in applied linguistics that can help us better understand issues in foreign language teaching, learning, and assessment. So if we think about synergies across people, it can help us better connect the work of researchers, practitioners, and students through collaborative projects and the dissemination of that work in both local and national forums. Synergies across contexts help us better address how secondary and post-secondary learning and teaching are connected or different from one another, or how learning languages, or how foreign languages are connected to other disciplines such as science and mathematics. And what I'll focus on most in the research portion of today's talk is synergies across content areas, in particular research and practice. Creating these kinds of content-related synergies is challenging, and how best to do that has been discussed and debated in applied linguistics research for decades. For instance, in 1997 and again in 2007, Firth and Wagner emphasized the need for a theoretical, methodological, and epistemological broadening of SLA. To meet this goal, various proposals that merge theory and practice have been put forth. For instance, Landhoff and other researchers working in sociocultural theory have emphasized the notion of praxis, which underscores the dialogic relationship between theory and practice, or scientific and everyday understandings. More recently, the Douglas Fir Group, in the 100th anniversary issue of the Modern Language Journal, proposed a transdisciplinary framework, or SLA, that brings together theory and practice by solving, and I'm quoting, problems in socially useful and participant-relevant or EMIC ways with whatever theoretical analytical tools are required. The challenge, of course, is in learning how best to align theory, research, and practice so that we can better understand synergies between language and literary cultural content or among various research strands explored in projects at CARLA, such as advanced proficiency development, learner language, or teacher education. CARLA's mission to study multilingualism and multiculturalism, to develop knowledge of second language acquisition, and to advance the quality of second language teaching, learning, and assessment contributes to the synergies listed on the slide, as does my research in foreign language literacy development and teacher professionalization, which I'll be talking to you about today. So here's an overview of what I'll be talking about. So first I'm going to be focusing on synergies across contexts and content and speaking about my own research. First, my research in foreign language literacy and the multiliteracies framework, and next, a new project that I'm doing on high leverage teaching practices and foreign language teacher development. And then I'll talk about synergies between my research and what's happening at CARLA and some ideas I have regarding current and future projects for the center. So as an applied linguist specializing in the teaching and learning of foreign languages, I take a praxis-based approach to my scholarship. That is, I see research, theory, and practice as tightly interwoven. This research vision has taken shape over the past 16 years as I transitioned from being a graduate student where I specialized in formal linguistics to a faculty position as an applied linguist in French and language program director. My early research placed heavy emphasis on practice. I was interested in how to better integrate authentic materials, particularly literature, into lower level language classes, and my first publications focused on teaching strategies and approaches for achieving this goal. Over time, however, my knowledge and interests have evolved, and today my scholarship is more solidly grounded in theory and empirical findings. I've become increasingly aware of the need to ground foreign language teaching and learning in frameworks that not only facilitate a holistic approach to language, literature, and culture, but are also conducive to sustained teacher professional development. Little existing research has coherently related these areas, and using the frameworks of a pedagogy of multiliteracies and sociocultural theory, I explore this gap in the research and focus on the broad questions you see on the slide. So today I'm going to talk about two strands of my research that attempt to answer these broad questions. The first is a subset of my work on foreign language literacy development that explores students' perceptions of multiliteracies pedagogy and how that pedagogy facilitates students' ability to interpret and transform textual content. And then the second strand is a new project on teacher development that I just mentioned on high leverage teaching practices and their connections to multiliteracies pedagogy. Both of these projects reflect a praxis orientation and facilitate the types of synergies mentioned earlier, such as those between research and practice, language and content, secondary and post-secondary teaching and learning, and foreign languages and other disciplines. To situate these strands of my scholarship, I'd like to begin by outlining 4 challenges facing foreign language education in the 21st century. As has long been argued in applied linguistics research, students entering advanced level foreign language courses do not always possess advanced level foreign language abilities. This is due to a number of factors in collegiate and K-12 contexts, all of which contribute in some way to the presence of curricular divides. At the collegiate level, the 2-tiered structure of many foreign language programs creates fixed lines of demarcation between introductory and intermediate language courses on the one hand, and advanced literary and cultural content courses on the other. While the overall trend in foreign language departments is to merge language and content in curriculum and instruction, a recent study by Rifkin found that nearly half of foreign language programs still reflect the language-literature divide, as you can see on the slide. The results of Rifkin's study suggest that undergraduate foreign language students may enroll in our classes to explore topics beyond literature, including the history, politics, society, or economy of the target culture. This potential mismatch between course offerings and student expectations may have a negative impact on enrollment. Indeed, the recent data on enrollment trends published by the MLA are not encouraging, as you can see on the slide. Equally discouraging is data related to foreign language offerings in K-12 contexts. A 2008 survey by the Center for Applied Linguistics found that over a 9-year period, foreign language offerings decreased in elementary and middle schools, as you can see on the slide, but remained steady in high schools. In addition, across K-12 contexts, there was an important decrease in the number of schools offering French and German, and only a slight increase in the number of schools offering Arabic and Chinese. This data, although somewhat outdated, raises concerns not only about the perceived value of foreign language study, but also about the limited number of long-sequence K-12 language programs that provide students with the linguistic and cultural abilities necessary to communicate effectively, and how these sequences articulate with collegiate foreign language programs. Indeed, a second curricular divide exists between secondary and post-secondary foreign language programs, as underscored by the data reported here, as well as a large body of research on articulation, including the work done by CARLA on the Minnesota Articulation Project. In addition, recent educational reforms at the K-12 level, including the Common Core State Standards, the ACTFL performance descriptors, and changes to advanced placement courses and exams, broadens this divide. Whereas standards and resources for guiding curricular content and learning outcomes are increasingly prevalent in K-12 contexts, at the collegiate level, such standards and resources are less important or inconsistently applied. One consequence of these curricular divides is the second challenge facing 21st century foreign language education, namely the need to merge language and content at all programmatic levels. Over 25 years ago, Heidi Burns made the now famous statement on the slide regarding the need to simultaneously develop students' language competencies and content knowledge across the four-year undergraduate sequence. The quote from Grabe and Stoller, who argue in favor of content-based instruction across K-16 contexts, underscores this need. However, as empirical research has shown us, there's little focus on textual analysis in language courses, and more important, little deliberate focus on development of language competencies in upper-level content courses. Students are therefore not provided with adequate opportunities for negotiation, elaborated responses, or extended discourse. As a result, students moving out of lower-level language courses are not prepared for the intellectually challenging content they will face at more advanced levels, and perhaps more important, we're still leaving language development to language courses. Yet given the long-term nature of SLA, linguistic support is required in all courses to allow students to develop the advanced level competencies we expect of them. A third and related challenge facing foreign language education in the 21st century is that many programs lack an overarching goal or framework to ground curriculum, instruction, and assessment practices, as the following quote illustrates. I'll just give you a sec to read that. Can everybody read the slides okay with the lights on? Okay. So without an overarching goal or framework, curricular divides are magnified. For instance, in lower-level language courses, communicative language teaching is the dominant methodology. Yet because of its heavy emphasis on oral functional language use and its view of reading and writing as support skills to practice language forms, treatment of cultural and textual content is often superficial or de-emphasized in favor of language development. Likewise, eclectic approaches to necessary cultural content in advanced level courses provides little explicit attention to continued language development. In programs with graduate teaching assistants, professional development experiences tend to focus on implementation of communicative language teaching, such that graduate students do not always learn how to teach a variety of linguistic, cultural, and literary content to a range of learners, skills that are essential for their success when they enter the job market. Indeed, the problems presented thus far contribute to a fourth challenge facing 21st century language education, that of teacher professional development. In foreign language graduate programs, there's a disconnect between students' teaching experiences before the PhD, which are summarized in the first bullet point on the slide, and what is expected of them afterward, as reflected in the wide range of duties listed in numerous foreign language job advertisements. Moreover, in spite of the very important role graduate students play in undergraduate foreign language instruction, there's a surprising lack of emphasis on teacher development in most graduate programs. According to published research, required training in pedagogy or applied linguistics is usually limited to a pre-service orientation followed by a one-semester methods course taken during the first semester or year of teaching. This situation is quite different from K-12 pre-service teacher education, which not only includes a range of pedagogical coursework, but also ongoing professional development and evaluation of teaching once teacher learners are in the classroom. Because of their limited teaching and professional development experiences, graduate students' confidence in their capacity to teach language does not necessarily translate into the same confidence about teaching literature, as the quote in the second bullet point illustrates. One reason for this is the lack of an overarching goal or framework to guide graduate students through their professional development as teacher scholars, a framework that can additionally serve to unite foreign language curriculum and instruction. Finally, across K-16 teacher development contexts, empirical findings reveal that learning how to apply concepts and strategies reflective of the kinds of holistic curricula and instructional practices I've been arguing for is a complex and long-term process. The 4 challenges I've identified, curricular divides, merging language and content, establishing an overarching goal, and teacher professional development, provide a context and rationale for my research into literacy-based teaching and learning and high-leverage teaching practices. So let's explore these by first looking at the concept of literacy. Literacy is traditionally defined as the ability to read and write, or as general learnedness and familiarity with literature. This narrow definition considers literacy as a set of separate skills that are the end product of instruction, as fixed and narrowly focused on a small range of text types and contexts of use, and as a phenomenon residing in the individual. On the slide is a broader definition of literacy proposed by Kern and inspired by work in New Literacy Studies. As you can see from the portion of the definition highlighted in blue, this definition of literacy focuses on the ability to interpret and transform texts of various genres, and here I'm talking about texts from a very large perspective: written, audio, audiovisual, visual, digital text, any kind of text you can think of. This definition also focuses on developing critical thinking, problem solving, and reflection abilities. It's dynamic and variable as opposed to static, and it has linguistic, cognitive, and sociocultural dimensions. So to illustrate the complex and dynamic nature of literacy as defined on the slide, let's look at a cartoon. Whoop. I'll give you a sec to... Right? Good, right? So as literate users of English, we need to understand a range of things to be able to interpret this. And this sort of illustrates that literacy is not at all static, right? And neither is it contextually void. So we need to understand Lassie and who she is and what her role is in our culture. Some of you in the audience may not know who Lassie is. You need to understand that the expression get help has dual meaning. We need to understand the role of therapy in American culture, and we also need to know something about the cartoon genre of The New Yorker, right? According to Kern, this broad understanding of the concept of literacy, with its focus on the interpretation and creation of multiple text types from various perspectives, and I quote, may well offer the common ground necessary for the reconciliation of language and literature teaching. Indeed, I argue that this definition of literacy can serve as an overarching goal for foreign language curriculum and instruction, more closely link the study of language with the study of literary cultural content, and more effectively contribute to development of students' advanced level abilities in a foreign language. Multiliteracies pedagogy serves as a framework for putting into practice the overarching goal of foreign language literacy development. So on the slide, you have a graphic representation of multiliteracies pedagogy. So I'm not going to talk about all of this, but this is your left, right? So in the top left, you have the content that we teach students, and so that's texts and the available designs that characterize them. I'm going to define available designs in a moment. In the upper right, you have the learning processes in which we want to engage students, and this involves interpretation, problem solving, and reflection. And then at the bottom, you have the instructional activities that allow us to apply the what and the how, that is the content and the learning processes. And these are 4 pedagogical acts, which I won't talk about today, but I'm happy to answer questions about that at the end. So I'm going to be focusing on the upper left portion of the graphic today. So I'm going to be focusing on the concept of available designs, as well as 3 other key concepts coming from the multiliteracies framework: meaning design, interpretation, and transformation. So within the multiliteracies framework, language learning is viewed as an active process of discovery that hinges on learners' ability to design meaning. Meaning design involves making form-meaning connections by interpreting and creating various text types. This means engaging students in problem solving related to how language forms are connected to their meanings and how they are used in texts, collaboration with the text and others, and reflection on textual meaning and how it relates to one's own worldview. Textual interpretation and transformation facilitate engagement in the act of meaning design. Interpretation involves moving beyond surface-level comprehension of a text's facts to delve into its underlying and varied cultural meanings and points of view. Transformation involves applying these new cultural understandings and points of view in creative speaking and writing tasks. As they design meaning, then, learners interpret, recycle, modify, and apply knowledge and resources or available designs in new ways. So let's look at the concept of available designs. These are the tools that learners use to interpret and transform texts. They are the linguistic, schematic, visual, gestural, audio, and spatial features of text that a learner attends to when designing meaning. In instruction, available designs constitute the content we teach students to develop their foreign language literacy. As they learn, students draw on existing available designs from their first language or from the second language and discover new ones to design meaning in texts. Two types of available designs are relevant for the study I'm going to talk about today, linguistic and schematic, and this is what's on the slide. Linguistic resources such as grammar, vocabulary, or writing conventions are associated with language forms and how those forms are put together to create words, sentences, and discourse. Schematic resources such as genre features, organizational patterns, or lived experiences are related to how textual meaning is organized and what knowledge is necessary to design meaning. Kern represents linguistic and schematic available designs on a continuum to highlight their overlapping nature, and that's what you see here. So for instance, something like the writing system, which includes punctuation and capitalization rules, is solidly on the linguistic end of the continuum, whereas something like background knowledge, which includes lived experiences or formal education, is solidly on the schematic end. And then you have sort of a fluidity with other types of resources. So if you take something like organizational patterns, which could include transition words, you can see that that spans both linguistic and schematic because it contributes to the organization of the text through linguistic means. Okay. So with this conceptual background established, I'd like to turn now to a study that I conducted to investigate reading-writing connections and students' ability to engage in the act of meaning design through activities grounded in multiliteracies pedagogy. So the research questions framing this study are presented on the slide, and what I'm going to be presenting you today is coming from an article that will appear in a 2017 issue of Reading in a Foreign Language. The study included 6 participants enrolled in an advanced French grammar and stylistics course. The course combined traditional and multiliteracies instruction. Approximately 60% of the course include instruction and assessments grounded in multiliteracies pedagogy. And so what this meant was, the way that it worked was that students would read literary texts, they would interpret those texts, and those texts served as a springboard for studying grammatical forms, as well as a content source for students' creative writing. They also engaged in problem solving related to how language forms contributed to textual meaning in the excerpts that they read, and they also engaged in reflection on their own learning. So there were 3 data sources. One was a questionnaire administered at the start and the close of the course. The second were the 4 creative writing assignments that students completed as an assessment for the course. And the third was 4 reflective journal entries that were also part of the assessments for the course that asked students to reflect on their learning experiences and their grammatical development through reading and writing. Triangulation of results from all data sources revealed 3 main findings, which I'll present briefly. So here we go. Okay. So the first finding emerging from the data was that students recognized connections between reading and writing and their contribution to language development. And the tables on the slide present aggregate results from questionnaire items asking students to indicate the degree to which they agreed or disagreed with statements, this is kind of long, the degree to which they agreed or disagreed with statements regarding reading and writing activities that contributed to their ability to learn, understand, and use French grammar. Okay. The results show that overall students valued both reading and writing, although they more positively perceived reading as contributing to their grammatical development. And these are just descriptive statistics. I didn't have a large enough sample to be able to run any other kind of stats. Qualitative data from journal entries support this finding. And two themes emerged from this qualitative data. First, reading and writing lead to increased grammar and vocabulary learning, gains in grammatical accuracy, and greater awareness of writing style and tone, as illustrated in the first quote. And all these quotes come from the reflective journal entries. So for instance, you can see that Veronica talks about how the reading and writing helped her recognize grammatical structures and think about them, and it allowed her to discover different ways to think about how language forms are used. Next, journal entries revealed that textual interpretation and transformation contributed to students' view of themselves as readers and writers of French, as illustrated in the second two quotes. So Frank talks about reading become an active process for him, and Ellen says she gained a lot of confidence in her ability to write. The second finding emerging from the data was that in creative writing assignments, students were more adept at using linguistic available designs like verbs and descriptive adjectives than schematic available designs like humor and informal style. Frequency count data from creative writing samples revealed that students used linguistic available designs more frequently than schematic ones, but frequency counts varied based on the position of available designs on the linguistic schematic continuum that I described earlier and that you see on the slide. For example, the grammatical resources of parataxis and dislocation were coded as linguistic resources, so that's why you've got the arrow pointing to vocabulary and syntax, but these resources have a schematic function because they indicate informal style in written French, so that's why there's the arrow pointing to genre and style. So what you see is that this grammatical resource is in this sort of fluid space on the linguistic schematic continuum. And overall, what I found was that resources used to indicate informal style, which sits closer to the schematic end of the continuum, were used less frequently than other linguistic available designs, such as verb forms, which sit closer to the linguistic end of the continuum. Qualitative data support the finding that students were more adept at integrating linguistic available designs into writing assignments than schematic ones. So here's the reflective journal data. So two trends in students' journal entries support this finding. First, students found writing creatively and adopting the style of a literary text to be challenging, but indicated that it led to a better understanding of targeted available designs, as indicated by the first two quotes on the slide. So Melissa says that writing in the same genre as a literary excerpt helped her to use grammar correctly, and Sophie talks about the challenge of respecting the tone and the style of the author in her own writing. Second, journal entries revealed that students found integrating available designs into writing less challenging as the course progressed, as indicated by the last quote from Veronica. So she says that it was challenging, but as long as you make the effort, it's not as hard as you think it is to change the style. This was towards the end of the course, so it was entry 4 at the end of the class. And I should mention that Veronica had a complete turnaround in this course. In the beginning, when asked if reading and writing had any contribution to her development in grammar, she said absolutely not. And she was all about, I have to memorize rules, I have to repeat, it was all rote. And then by the end of the class, she was saying things like this. So it was really very interesting. Okay. So the third finding emerging from the data was that students struggled to see available designs as tools for creative self-expression and not simply as forms to be mastered. The example of Veronica I just gave illustrates that. But that their perceptions of available designs may have shifted during the course. And again, thinking back to Veronica. According to questionnaire results, students had more positive perceptions of identifying grammatical features in literary texts and writing in different genres and styles in the post-course questionnaire, and therefore may have viewed available designs as tools for creative self-expression over time. Qualitative data from reflective journal entries reveal two trends. First, students were able to establish connections between linguistic available designs, so verbs and descriptive adjectives, for instance, and the active meaning design carried out through reading and writing activities. And this is illustrated in Sophie's quote, where she talks about how she was able to see grammar usage, what its function was, how it reflected the style of the text, and then how she could, by extension, apply this to her own writing. Students' ability to connect schematic available designs with the active meaning design, however, was variable, as evidenced by the differences between Frank and Ellen in the last two quotes on the slide. So Frank says he developed a new understanding of how hard it is to write in a certain style, whereas Ellen just said, I know how to use grammar better. And this is what she said through the whole thing. She was hardcore prescriptive the whole way through. So it's kind of the opposite of Veronica. So what are the implications of this study? When I began this presentation, I talked about a number of synergies or connections that characterize my research as well as the work carried out at CARLA, and I'd like to consider implications of this study in relation to some of these synergies, particularly those that span content areas. The first implication on the slide highlights connections between research and practice. By understanding how available designs are conceptualized theoretically and where they fall on the linguistic schematic continuum, we can more effectively design instructional activities. Specifically, more focused attention on schematic available designs is necessary in instruction, as these resources are not immediately evident to students when they interpret texts and are less easily integrated into textual transformation or writing activities. Next, the study's findings reveal that instruction is essential to help students interpret available designs in texts and make explicit the meaning-making nature of these resources. Specifically, multiliteracies pedagogy applied to the teaching of literature and the prioritization of students' ability to design meaning through reading and writing activities centered around literature have the potential to help students recognize connections between language and content. Finally, connecting language and content through a pedagogical approach that prioritizes foreign language literacy development and focuses on how learners use language to interpret and transform texts can contribute to understanding the nature of learner language and its connection to students developing advanced level foreign language competencies. With these synergies and implications in mind, I'd like to move on to discuss my research on foreign language teacher development. These two strands of research are themselves synergistic because both investigate pedagogies and approaches, that is, literacy and the multiliteracies framework, that contribute to language learning and frame teacher development. In transitioning to a discussion of this second strand of research, I'd like to return to the concept of praxis and discuss why this orientation to teacher professional development is important. So for decades, the focus in research on teacher development has been on cognition, particularly teachers' knowledge base, beliefs, and decision-making related to teaching. Recently, however, there's been a shift away from cognition-oriented research toward research on the behaviors in which effective teachers engage, how those behaviors relate to teachers' knowledge base and theoretical understandings, and how teacher educators can implement professional development experiences that highlight theory-practice relationships. This overall shift in teacher development research was recently underscored in a special issue of the Modern Language Journal. In this journal's opening piece, Kubanova and Feriak argued that the body of cognitively oriented research on teacher development has failed to adequately address questions related to how foreign language teachers create effective learning environments for their students, or how teacher education programs should best incorporate results from teacher cognition research. They further highlighted the need to investigate cognition in action, that is, to create opportunities to study and implement relationships among teacher cognition, teaching practice, and student learning. The importance of shifting both research and teacher education efforts toward a focus on praxis is supported by a number of findings and reports summarized on the slide that call for a reconceptualized vision of foreign language teacher development. A recent report on from the MLA on doctoral study in languages and literatures claims that graduate programs tend to devalue teaching, which is counter to national trends focused on effective teaching that optimizes student success. In response, the MLA argued for greater emphasis on foreign language teacher preparation through coursework, practical experience, and mentoring, and they focus in particular on transferable skills when they talk about this in the report. Second, a quick look at recent academic job postings shows that there are fewer and fewer tenure-track jobs and more sophisticated preparation expected of applicants, despite the limited scope of their professional development experiences. The state of the job market underscores the need to provide more diverse, praxis-oriented teacher development experiences that focus on teaching as a professional reality and prepare foreign language graduate students to capably carry out a variety of tasks in a range of professional contexts. Finally, it's vital that we overcome the shortcomings in graduate student teacher preparation highlighted earlier in this presentation, that is, the pre-service orientation plus the one-semester methods course in the first year. The marginalization of graduate student teacher development within the scholarly work of foreign language programs is highly problematic, and significant changes are needed to integrate foreign language graduate students into a community of teachers and scholars through a range of professional development opportunities. With this rationale for a praxis-oriented approach to teacher development in mind, I'd like to talk to you about my new project on high-leverage teaching practices and connections between teacher behavior and the multiliteracies framework. So I'll give you a sec to read that slide while I take a sip of water. So this project has received funding from Phase 3 of the ACTFL's Research Priorities Initiative, and is a collaboration between myself and Heather Allen at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We were motivated to do this project because although research on high-leverage teaching practices, or HLTPs, which I'll say from now on, so although research on HLTPs has increased over the past several years, very few investigations into their use in foreign language contexts exists. In addition, previous research is limited to HLTPs in K-12, among K-12 novice teacher learners, and to our knowledge, studies investigating HLTPs among experienced collegiate teacher learners do not exist. The project is comprised of 2 parts summarized on the slide. So the first part, which is nearly done, which we're going to actually work on this weekend, I'm going to Madison on Friday to finish data collection, is a position paper in which we lay out a rationale for studying HLTPs in collegiate foreign language contexts, explore relationships between HLTPs and the multiliteracies framework, and suggest implications for integrating HLTPs into graduate teaching assistants' professional development experiences. The second part of the project is a pilot study investigating the perceptions and use of HLTPs among experienced French GTAs at our respective institutions. So we've completed the Wayne State University phase of data collection, and as I just mentioned, we'll be completing the Wisconsin phase. We're doing our interviews on Monday for that. Data sources for the pilot project include a questionnaire on GTAs teaching knowledge, experiences, and practices, classroom observations, and accompanying lesson plans, and follow-up interviews after the classroom observations. And the research questions that frame this part of the study, that is the pilot project, are listed here on the slide. So since we're still in the data collection phase of the project, I don't have any results to report to you. So I want to just give you a definition of HLTPs and then present some of the findings from authoring our position paper and talk about how we intend to move forward with this line of research. So on the slide, you have a definition of HLTPs, which are the core practices essential for effective teaching and student learning, as well as some examples of established HLTPs from the research. And I should say, I didn't cite it, but this comes from work out of the University of Michigan, their Teaching Works program. Some of you may be familiar with it if you know what HLTPs are, but so this is pulled from their work. So key to an understanding of HLTPs is that core practices must be connected to teachers' pedagogical and theoretical knowledge through analysis and discussion. As such, HLTPs reflect the shift in teacher development research discussed earlier from an exclusive focus on cognition to a focus on knowledge and practice. Research on HLTPs originated in mathematics and science education and the preparation of K-12 teachers. The goal of this research has been to define a core set of teaching practices and to develop appropriate pedagogies for teaching those practices to novice teachers. Although determination of HLTPs is highly focused on practice, it's important to restate that connecting theory and practice is essential to defining core practices and to effectively using them in teacher development contexts. Foreign language programs have much to learn and to contribute to the research on HLTPs in K-12 mathematics and science education. Teaching is a common enterprise shared across disciplines, and identifying a set of core practices that can be adapted to fit different subject areas and teaching contexts highlights that commonality. Moreover, given the strong emphasis on STEM fields and the less prominent role of the humanities in 21st century educational contexts, a research focused on HLTPs shows that there's a shared language for talking about scholarship, teaching, and teacher development across disciplines, and that the humanities have a relevant and vital role in establishing that shared language. Determining HLTPs for foreign language teaching involves attending to the theoretical principles that underlie a core practice, recognizing which practices are most frequent, deciding which have the highest impact on student learning, and determining how these practices can be classified and broken down into finer-grained micro-practices. Established lists of HLTPs from science and mathematics contexts provide a starting point for this work, but foreign language researchers must consider which of these core practices are applicable to our discipline and also which are absent from the list but relevant for foreign language teaching. An advantage of investigating HLTPs in foreign language contexts is that because they apply across the curriculum regardless of level or content focus, they're another means to bridging the kinds of curricular divides I mentioned earlier in this presentation. Findings from the work we've completed to author our position paper reveal 3 important gaps in previous research on HLTPs in foreign language contexts. And there is a small body of research in foreign language contexts that's been emerging. Most of it funded by the Research Priorities Project from ACTFL, actually. So to address the first gap in the research listed on the slide, the position paper considers how HLTPs connect to foreign language literacy development, the multiliteracies framework, and teacher development grounded in sociocultural theory. This is an important contribution to research in both HLTPs and the multiliteracies framework for a number of reasons. First, HLTPs represent an instantiation of praxis, as I stated earlier. Situating HLTPs within concepts from the multiliteracies framework and considering HLTPs as teacher behaviors that can advance students' foreign language literacy development reflects this praxis orientation. Second, a significant gap in research on the multiliteracies framework is how teachers put the approach into practice and how challenging this can be to do. The pedagogical acts of multiliteracies pedagogy can be quite opaque to novice learners. They are the component parts of an overall approach that can be implemented as needed based on instructional context and learner needs. They are not a method that can be implemented in a predictable sequence or lesson structure. By considering implementation of multiliteracies pedagogy in terms of HLTPs, we might gain insights into the challenges of applying the approach, the types of behaviors novice teachers should learn to effectively implement the approach, and ways to better equip teachers to effectively use the approach. Finally, as underscored in the special issue of the Modern Language Journal on teacher development research, sociocultural theory can provide a unique perspective on teacher education as a way of bringing together what we know about teacher cognition and the practices in which teachers engage. As Kubanyova and Feriak put it, SCT provides a lens for viewing cognition through the participation metaphor. We attempt to address the second and third gaps listed on the slide through our pilot study, which focuses on perceptions and use of HLTPs among experienced and effective French graduate teaching assistants. We expect that a focus on this specific group of teachers will provide insight into those HLTPs that are appropriate for foreign language teaching in collegiate contexts, as well as into what novice teachers can learn from their more experienced colleagues. In the future, we intend to use results from the pilot study to conduct a larger scale, cross-institutional, multi-language study that establishes a clear set of teaching practices characteristic of foreign language teachers, that grounds these practices in principles from the multiliteracies framework, and that will better prepare teacher scholars for the responsibilities they will carry out after they leave their graduate programs. Certainly, we see that this work will have implications for how we structure and carry out the required methods course, how we create sustained professional development experiences across the years that GTAs work in our departments, and how we support teachers in effectively implementing curriculum and instruction grounded in text-based learning. In addition, in drawing on research conducted in K-12 mathematics and science teacher education, this work has the potential to create synergies across disciplines and contexts, and to create better communication between colleagues in foreign language departments and colleges of education, centered around the common enterprise of teacher professional development. So returning to this concept of synergies, I'd like to refocus my attention on CARLA, which has had a long and successful history and which plays an increasingly important role in synergistic relationships between research and practice, language and content, secondary and post-secondary contexts, foreign languages and other disciplines, researchers, practitioners, and students, and local and national audiences and issues. Given that the overall mission of the language resource centers is to develop resources that can be used broadly to improve foreign language education in the United States, and that CARLA's specific mission is to study multilingualism and multiculturalism, to develop knowledge of second language acquisition, and to advance the quality of second language teaching, learning, and assessment, the center plays a vital role in increasing the viability of foreign language study in the United States. Coming from an institution where foreign language enrollments are waning, funding is increasingly more scarce, and colleagues outside of our discipline do not always value what we do, I see firsthand the importance of this mission. In working to improve the situation of foreign languages at my current institution, connecting with people and conducting outreach efforts have been our most successful strategies in educating others about what we do and why it's important. This kind of outreach to other units on campus, to schools and universities in the Detroit metro area and the state of Michigan, to community organizations, and to local, national, and international businesses is another way of creating synergies across people and contexts. At CARLA, outreach is an essential part of the center's mission, and the success of such efforts is reflected in a variety of ways, including the range and depth of the center's projects, faculty, staff, and students, and the types of colleagues who participate in the center's professional development initiatives and conferences. As an example, let's look at the breakdown of participants in past CARLA workshops and institutes. So this is pulled from your website. So these data reveal that CARLA workshops and institutes provide fertile ground for talking about local and national issues related to language teaching and learning, with participants representing a variety of contexts and languages. With such a diverse knowledge, the center can with such a diverse audience, the center can disseminate knowledge from its projects and professional development efforts to a broad range of faculty, practitioners, and students, and foreground issues that are of vital importance to the maintenance and development of foreign language teaching and learning. Likewise, the projects that CARLA supports contribute to the depth and breadth of the center's outreach and influence in national and local discussions about foreign language teaching and learning in the United States. Excuse me. So since I don't have time today to talk about all of CARLA's projects, I'm just going to focus on 4, some of which have been constants over the life of the center, others that represent evolutions of past projects or new lines of research. I'll talk briefly about the importance of each project in relation to some of the issues I've raised today, and suggest ideas for future projects that might be considered in the 2018 grant cycle. CARLA's work in the area of content-based language teaching, including immersion education, has been far-reaching. This line of research is of particular interest to me because it connects with my research in foreign language literacy development and text-based teaching and learning. The current project, so Charlotte, I'm going to talk about your project now. The current project on advanced proficiency in academic environments builds on previous work conducted at the center and explores innovative approaches to addressing environmental issues through the lens of foreign languages. Projects centered around content-based language teaching and immersion education play an extremely important role in the kind of outreach efforts and synergies I've been discussing. Indeed, this year's International Conference on Immersion and Dual Language Education, with its theme, Connecting Research and Practice Across Contexts, reflects synergies across content areas and various learning contexts. Moreover, these projects provide a way to connect with various types of language educators and with colleagues across disciplines. With national trends to create foreign language majors combined with subjects like engineering, biology, or business, the current project on advanced proficiency in academic environments has the potential to be far-reaching. In the future, projects in this area might investigate which pedagogies or approaches are most effective for content-based language teaching and how those pedagogies or approaches contribute to development of students' language proficiency or their content area knowledge and their ability to interpret, reflect, and think critically. And here I'm thinking, of course, about approaches such as literacy-based pedagogy, but also genre-based pedagogy or project-based learning, which could create a synergy with the Language Resource Center at Hawaii, right? They're the ones who do project-based learning, yeah. Such past, present, and future initiatives can also provide research grounding for thinking about issues of articulation across K-16 contexts. Certainly, more synergistic relationships between secondary and post-secondary foreign language education can help further advances in content-based and immersion education and the pedagogical approaches that facilitate them. And in fact, today I was speaking with Tara about articulation and problems of articulation between immersion programs and moving into high school contexts or into college contexts. So a project of that type could be something that CARLA thinks about pursuing in the future. The Language Teacher Education Conference, hosted biannually by CARLA and co-hosted next year by CARLA and NHLRC in Los Angeles, is another forum for bringing together educators from a variety of contexts to discuss issues of national importance. With conference themes spanning the knowledge base of language teacher education, social, cultural, and political contexts of language teacher education, collaborations in language teacher education, and practices of language teacher education, this conference is touching on essential issues in foreign language teaching and teacher development. In the future, I'd like to see CARLA contribute to emerging discussions about teacher practice through workshops, themes, and plenary speakers at the conference, and also through projects funded by the center. A project on high-leverage teaching practices, for instance, could not only create synergies across K-16 contexts, but could also dovetail with work on content-based language teaching, immersion education, online education, or learner language. Additionally, a focus on teacher development issues relevant across educational contexts could help establish or strengthen connections with national organizations such as ACTFL or the AAUSC, which is the American Association of University Supervisors and Coordinators, the Professional Association for Language Program Directors. As an example, CARLA might partner with AAUSC and CORAL, the LRC at the University of Texas, Austin, to develop their digital badge program, which is already in place for K-12 teachers. The program could be expanded to include post-secondary foreign language teachers, as well as teacher educators and language program directors. CARLA's long-term focus on technology has shifted with the changing times. Technology has now become an essential component of nearly all of CARLA's projects, and a new initiative to advance online education is in place. The L24 project is a perfect example of synergies between research and practice. Efforts to educate teachers about online courses include a theoretical and research-based component, as well as a practical component focused on how to develop students' interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational communication in an online format. In the future, these efforts could be expanded to focus on a variety of Web 2.0 tools, for instance. One idea includes exploring digital social reading sites such as eComma or Goodreads as tools for enhancing collaboration and understanding among learners interacting with textual content. These tools already form part of projects at other LRCs and create additional opportunities for collaboration. For instance, CARLA might partner with Circle at the University of Arizona on its new project on hypermedia text to explore how teachers can be effectively trained to implement digital social reading tools in K-16 online teaching contexts. In addition, because CARLA is developing courses and workshops related to teaching foreign languages online, the center might collaborate with CORAL at Texas to contribute to the expansion of their online methods course. This is already underway with them developing a module in Arabic, and adding a module on online teaching could be a real plus for that methods course. This kind of work certainly better connects students to foreign language study, but also creates possibilities for connecting language and content, secondary and post-secondary teachers, foreign languages and other disciplines, and various language resource centers. Finally, CARLA's new project on learner language provides a way to tie findings in SLA research to classroom teaching. Through analyzing oral language samples, teachers of less commonly taught languages are able to see how learner language develops and what that means for the way they organize classroom instruction. This project is particularly interesting to me given the research I shared earlier related to students' ability to appropriately interpret and apply available designs through reading and writing activities. With a clear understanding of what learner language looks like, foreign language teachers can better see why learners use language the way they do and how instruction might affect learning. If this project continues in the future, it would be useful to, of course, expand the languages studied, to look at learners' written productions, and future projects might also explore learners developing foreign language literacy and how that's tied to their ability to understand textual resources, such as linguistic and schematic available designs, and use them to express themselves orally and in writing. So although I've suggested some ideas for developing CARLA's current projects and moving forward to the next grant cycle, I believe that for anyone stepping into the CARLA director position, the first order of business is to watch, listen, and learn. Communicate with CARLA's faculty, staff, and students, establish relationships with various stakeholders on and off campus, see what's working well, and identify areas where innovation or change is needed. Without establishing the lay of the land in this way, creating synergies across contexts, content areas, and people will be all the more challenging. As I mentioned in my application letter for this position, one of my great pleasures in my professional life is to collaborate with others and to work in a team environment where people communicate constructively and explore new ideas together. And I'm getting a sense of that here, so it's really delightful to see that. I'm enthusiastic to learn from everyone at CARLA and its affiliated programs at the University of Minnesota, and to work together to maintain the high quality of the center's projects and professional development and outreach efforts. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for your questions. Yes, Charlotte.
I'll get this started. So this is a sort of challenge question for you. In 2017, the Modern Language Association is going to have its summer American Department of English, APFL, American Departments of Foreign Languages summer seminar on campus. And
Oh, here at Minnesota?
yes.
Oh, nice.
Yep. And obviously, this is an opportunity to talk to chairs of all kinds of departments and others who might be coming to this. So what would you see yourself talking with them about as a CARLA director or as someone interested in the multiple literacies approach and advocating for that approach?
Yeah, I mean, as given my heavy involvement with the AAUSC, I think one order of business would be trying to educate chairs about what language teachers and language program directors do. We've been trying to do that a little bit in the association, but we've been inconsistent in our participation in the ADFL seminar. So I think that would be one area to talk with them about. And I really think, I mean, I've been talking with some of you about this today, and I've been thinking about it a lot as I've been preparing. I think K through 16 articulation is a really important topic for us to be thinking about. There's a real disconnect between what's happening, what K-12 teachers are doing, and what we're doing. And I'm saying this just anecdotally more than anything else. I've shared with a couple of you my experience at ACTFL in last November, where some colleagues of mine were presenting, collegiate level colleagues were giving an AP presentation about persuasive writing, and the teachers, the K-12 teachers in the audience were so hostile when they started talking about method and theoretical grounding of the lesson plan they were about to present. We're teachers, don't they know we're teachers? We don't care about this kind of stuff. And so this academic versus practical distinction has, I think, become greater and greater. And so it's something we need to bridge the divide, I think, because K-12 teachers have enough to worry about, right? So I think I think CARLA is in a position to be able to do that because of its presence with language teacher education and immersion education. So I think those would be two issues to address.
I don't know if this is a question or just a follow-up, but the little anecdote you just shared is well, shocking, interesting, whatever. But what it makes me think of is at the collegiate level, if language instruction is trying to merge more with content instruction, I could see how the high school teachers would feel further from that in a way. That if we're trying to up our ante to show that we are valuable at the university, that we have... We
as in language program directors, language teachers,
yes, that we have intellectually stimulating, meaningful content that the high school teachers... or maybe I'll let you say what you think about that.
Well, I hear what you're saying, I do. And I work with a lot of K-12 teachers in our Master of Arts in Language Learning program, so that's our target audience for that. And I teach a literacy course using... Well, I used my book for the first time because it just came out. But they're resistant. I'm not gonna lie. It's hard to get buy-in. But the thing is, I think what's really key, what I've learned teaching this literacy course over time, is that you need to learn, what I try to help them do is to think about how to adapt to their own context and to their own learners. So they're not going to be able to do activities or deal with texts that are as cognitively demanding potentially, but to learn a toolkit that they can use to apply to their particular context makes that kind of thing accessible. And I think what's key is not so much, okay, now you have to teach content, but if we go back to that quote that I put up from Heidi, if I can find it. I mean, basically, language from the beginning, content to the end, right? That applies to all of us. And not just in the language programs, I'm putting language in quotes because the language program is everybody, but it applies to our intro language courses, our advanced literary cultural content courses, what we're doing at the K-12 level. I mean, I strongly believe in that. I don't know if that's impractical, but in my experience working with teachers who are in those contexts, there are ways to think about this. It's just a matter of being flexible and creative in thinking about it. Yeah.
You mentioned on multiple occasions, needing to improve professional development for grad students.
Mm-hmm.
And as your one chart indicated, like in CARLA activities, like 6% of the participants were grad students. I'm going to go out on a limb that I think is a relatively secure limb and say that that is not a very large percent of the grad student population that is involved in teaching language courses. How do you get grad students to buy into these activities rather than just seeing them as one more thing that we probably aren't going to do?
Yeah, I think it's important to show graduate students how important participation in those kinds of things is for their future as teacher scholars. Because if you and educate graduate students about the job market. I mean, I assume you're a graduate student because you're asking the question. So it's not so good, right? I mean, I don't want to scare you, but you probably already know this. And so I think it's important to be realistic about what the options are once you finish your graduate program. And it's up to faculty or CARLA or whatever entity to educate graduate students about that so that they know how to prepare themselves for what they're going to face when they leave. And that also participating in these kinds of things is part of the academic life of everybody once they get out of graduate school. And so to say, I don't have time for this or whatever, you can't say that once you're a faculty member, right? And it's an intellectually enriching part of our jobs, and it's also a way to create connections and get to know our colleagues and be a member of the academic community. So I think just educating and mentoring is the way to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess kind of a follow-up question to that is, do you think that language departments need to play more of a role in prioritizing that professional development for their graduate TAs?
Yes.
And how do you think you as a director, as CARLA, could play a part in that?
Well, I think here at CARLA, there's a perfect opportunity for doing that by working with the Language Center, right? And that's kind of the bridge to the language departments. And so by doing workshops or being involved in the methods course or those kinds of things is a way of creating that kind of a connection, right? And the CARLA director is in a position the CARLA director has the ear of the dean in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, so that's another way of sort of thinking about, it's a more of a top-down way of thinking about how to educate graduate students in language departments, about that kind of stuff. But yes, I think it should happen in the language departments, yeah. Yeah.
I'll also pick up on the thread.
Yeah.
From graduate students, not only how do we involve our graduate students, but how do we involve all of us? And that means from faculty involved in more diverse content.
Yeah, that's the big question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I have an answer. Buy-in is tough. We're working on, just to give you an example, we're working on curriculum revision right now in my French area, in my department. And we're getting pushback on making curricular change because people don't want to change. They want to teach the courses that they've always taught. They're trained in specific disciplines, and broadening their approach to that discipline is very challenging to them. So one of the things that we've done is we're kind of doing a backward design approach to our curriculum revision. So we started by putting together a departmental mission statement, and that's trickling down to the different language areas, and then we're using that to help us come up with learning objectives, and then to think about how we can change our courses to better meet those learning objectives. But it's a very slow process. And that's the big question. It's the other question that's the big question that somebody else might ask, I don't know, is how do you select text? Right? These are the two questions I never have a good answer for. So I apologize, but I think it's something that involves collaboration and communication and patience. Yeah. Yeah, Dan.
Where does the urge to redesign the curriculum come from?
We had an external program review that said that all of our language programs needed to be modernized, that we're still on the century model and we shouldn't be on the century model anymore, and we needed to change. So some language areas, we're a large department and each language area is fairly autonomous in terms of curriculum. So some language areas are just changing course titles. And others are actually having discussions about curriculum, which is what ours is doing. But we're getting pushback. I mean, we have some untenured faculty, we have some senior faculty who are getting ready to retire. So you can guess where the pushback's coming from. And so it's an interesting process of negotiation and equal parts patience and frustration, right? I mean, to be perfectly blunt. So we'll see. We've been working on it now for about 1.5 years, and we haven't even implemented anything yet. So, yeah, but it was an external program review, and then the chair said, okay, we need an ad hoc curriculum committee that's going to start getting the ball rolling with that. I chaired that committee for 1 year. That was when we put together the mission statement. We gathered student focus group data and questionnaire data from students to see where they thought gaps were in our program, which aligned with the gaps we had identified anecdotally from our experiences, which to me seems compelling, right? And a really good impetus for change. But then when you get everybody in a room together, it's a little bit different. So. Yeah.
You spoke about outreach efforts of young student university. Could you talk more about that and how you think you could do that here with CARLA?
Yeah, we have a new chair in our department who's extremely enthusiastic about bolstering our foreign language enrollments. So she's been doing on-site visits at various high schools and colleges that don't have graduate programs in the state of Michigan to try to get students. One of the things that I've done is we have a Michigan World Languages Conference. And so we've created a new flyer for our Master of Arts in Language Learning program. We go to the conference and talk to teachers and try to recruit students, because having that face-to-face contact is really what's helping us to get students to come talk to us. Another thing that we do is we participate in an AP day at the institution, so that they bring in students who are taking AP classes to explore the university. And so the French area has been collaborating to lead a day long or a half day workshop with them where we do various activities to get them excited about studying foreign languages. Was there a second part to the question?
How do you think you would do that here?
Oh, well, I think CARLA provides great opportunities for that, right? I mean, there's already a national forum for thinking about these kinds of issues through the conferences that the center sponsors and through participation in the LRCs in general. So I see that as being a central mission of CARLA, and participating in conferences, talking about the center when you're presenting at conferences, being at the booth in the exhibitor area and meeting people, that kind of thing, yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that you've mentioned, and I think many of us in this room have talked about, is that idea of K-16 articulation.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on where to start?
I just think we need to start talking to each other. And I think that the Language Teacher Education Conference is a great forum for doing that, because it draws in K-12 teacher educators as well as post-secondary teacher educators. And so I think that's a great place for doing that. But I think it has to start with talking and finding some common ground that we all share, because there are differences and similarities in these two contexts, and we can't assume that we all have the same goals or ways of doing things, right? I mean, I mentioned the Common Core State Standards and the ACTFL performance descriptors. We're not using that stuff, at least not in my context at my institution. I'm sure other universities are referring at least to the ACTFL performance descriptors. But I think finding some kind of common ground to be able to see where we can come together is the first step in that. And then after that, just kind of see where it goes. Yeah, Tara.
You know, one of the things I was thinking about when you were in your presentation, you were sharing the data on the declines that we're seeing in language departments, right?
Yeah.
And also the decline that you showed in elementary education.
Yeah, it's a little old, that data.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was thinking about, because I know that there's especially the K-12 data well, and I remember in the same way that elementary ed decline in elementary ed world language programs was 8% during that same period. There was a rise in immersion. Elementary immersion programs of 14%.
Uh-huh.
And now that's published in 2008. The field of immersion in dual language since that time
has exploded.
To just grow exponentially. And I think that has some enormous implications for what articulation needs to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess my question is, can you talk a little bit about and more about thoughts that you would have to help us articulate and grow these immersion programs that are very strong and growing in strength, particularly pre-K-8, as they move forward up into secondary and post-secondary?
Yeah, so as we were discussing earlier today, we were talking about this when we met earlier, I was thinking about IB schools and the fact that, at least with the teachers that I work with, those who are working in IB schools are doing really sophisticated things with their students in terms of text-based learning and the kinds of language proficiencies that those students exhibit. And so that could be an interesting place to look at transitions. How do students transition there? And then what makes them successful? Because that seems like a smooth transition to me from an immersion environment to an IB school. And then see how an understanding of that context could then help inform transitions to a regular high school kind of learning environment, right? So that would be one idea. I mean, I think that's a hard question. I mean, I don't know a lot about the immersion research, so I think educating teachers beyond the immersion context about what these students are capable of doing and what you can expect of them when they get into your programs, and maybe thinking about providing different tracks for them in foreign languages when they get to the high school environment so that they're not bored or they don't give up on foreign languages, or providing college equivalencies, if there's something like that could be an idea to think of. I'm just kind of brainstorming, yeah. So, yeah.
Well, with that, we
All right.
thank you very much.
Thank you.